Welcome to the HR Business Blueprint podcast. I'm Nikki Masterman, founder and CEO of Inspired HR. In this series, alongside my fabulous guests, we will be chatting about becoming a consultant and building a HR business. Welcome to the HR Business Blueprint podcast. This week on my podcast, I have got the amazing Daniel Barnett. So Daniel Barnett is a leading employment law barrister. He is a radio presenter for the Legal Hour, and he is also the founder and director of the HR Inner Circle, which is a leading HR membership organisation. Welcome to my podcast, Daniel.
Thank you, Nikki.
So Daniel, thank you for joining us. For our listeners, tell us in your own words what your background is and what it is that you do.
Well, I'm a barrister by training, so I've practiced and continue to practice as a barrister for about the last 30 years, although I no longer practice full-time as a barrister. I run several other businesses as well, most of which revolve around teaching HR professionals how to keep up to date with the law. I also, as you mentioned, have a show on LBC. I present the Legal Hour on a Saturday night. I'm a professional theatre critic. I have a column in a magazine, and I spend far too much time going on holiday, which is fantastic.
But isn't that why we work hard, so we can go on holiday?
I do think I work very, very hard in my 20s, 30s and 40s and 50s. There's a chance, if you're able, and I'm really lucky, just to sit back a little bit and take a little more time off. And I still work hard, but I only work hard for about 40 weeks of the year.
And I don't blame you. I mean, being a person in business myself, that's my plan. I'm going through the high growth, working really hard at the moment, but the plan is at 60, I step back to just doing a couple of days a week, and Jenny and my team start to take over by that point to enable me. Like you, I like my holidays. It's why we work hard. It's that quality family time, which, let's face it, we deserve with how hard we work.
We do. But then, of course, there are many people out there who have very, very demanding jobs and jobs that perhaps don't pay as well as yours and mine, Nikki, who deserve holidays far more than we do. We're just lucky, right place, right time, and we've been lucky in life.
Yeah, so Daniel, let's talk about how I first met you. So I have been in consultancy for 9 years now, and it's been a journey. The whole point of my podcast is to educate and support HR consultants more than anything on what my journey has looked like over the last 9 years and share the highs and the lows. It's not easy being in business. You know, the amount of times we may get a comment of, oh, it must be so nice. You've got it so easy. You're so lucky. There's nothing lucky about it. We work hard, and we will always have the worries of paying staff and paying VAT, and are the clients going to pay on time? So we've all got challenges in business. When I first went into HR consultancy, I didn't know anyone. It was lonely. There was none of these Facebook groups that exist now. And over my first 2 or 3 years, I kind of came across a couple of HR consultant groups on Facebook, and your name came up a few times. Now, I'd spent 24 years in corporate HR working my way up. I'd never actually heard of you when I was in corporate HR, and I wish I had, because obviously the wealth of experience and knowledge that you share is just unfounded. I've not found it anywhere else. And I'd kind of heard about you a few times. And I was like, I just don't know who this Daniel Barnett is. And then, of course, I then started looking into you. And then I went along, I think, to one of your legal events. It was someone who'd mentioned you time and time again. And you were being mentioned on the basis of you are the person that enables us, once we're outside of internal corporate, we haven't got anyone we can go to anymore. We haven't got anyone upskilling us. I've never gone the academic route, CIPD or degree or anything like that. So I certainly didn't have the educational background, but I needed someone to make sure I kept up to date. But also, as I start to build a team, how did I keep them up to date as well and on top of things? So that's how I ended up becoming a member of the HR Inner Circle and realising the wealth of experience and knowledge that you share. What was your inspiration for the HR Inner Circle? Where did that come from?
Well, having practiced as an employment law barrister for many, many years, I'd realised that one of the difficulties that HR people have is partly staying up to date and partly having a sense of support, community, because HR can be a really lonely job. You're expected to be the calm centre of every storm, handle dismissals, grievances, mental health crises, which I know is a particular speciality of yours, Nikki, restructuring plans, leadership, politics, everything. And it's really easy to underestimate the emotional and professional load that HR carries. And what I wanted to do was support the people I was working with every day in a tribunal. I'd be either supporting those HR professionals who were being cross-examined and sometimes being made to look a little bit foolish and being very upset afterwards, or doing the cross-examining myself and making HR people look foolish, because that was the day job and I was quite good at it. But I came to realize that being nasty to people in tribunal, as much as it was great fun when I started out in my 20s, which is a very long time ago, becomes quite wearying after years and years and years of doing the same thing. And I wanted to be able to help people as opposed to bringing them down. So I set up the HR Inner Circle initially so that HR people could get knowledge, training, and understand what it was they had to do in a practical sense. No academic, no theory, no long articles talking about what the law is. It's just what you do. This is the next step. This is the next step. Checklists, templates. And it's been running about 11 years now. I know you were a very, very early joiner. After a couple of years, I realized that the biggest part of it wasn't the fact that I was out there talking about the law, but making it easy to understand. It was the shared experience. It was the community. It was the context, the confidence, the reassurance that members had, particularly when we have our very many huddles or our Facebook meetings or in-person meetings, that they're not the only people dealing with difficult situations. And that sense of community is really powerful. It also helps improve people's decision-making because you can bounce ideas off other HR professionals. Someone in the HR Inner Circle has been in the same situation as you many times. Most importantly, it just gives you that confidence that means you can go home in the evening, pour yourself a glass of wine and relax rather than worrying, rather than having sleepless nights, rather than thinking every minute, did I get that decision right? Because you've got the confidence to know that you made the best decision you could, probably on limited information, probably without all the time you'd want to make the decision, because decisions are made in minutes and seconds, not weeks and days. And it just gives people a better life.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a fantastic community. I mean, the community, when I came into it, I've met some fabulous people that now partner with me, you know, HR consultants and companies that we deliver services for. We've got a number of standalone HR consultants that are in your membership that deliver work for us. I mean, you probably know Penny Douglas does a lot of work for us. She's absolutely fabulous. She's brilliant. You know, she does a lot of our tribunal work for us and just a wealth of experience. But the community, I mean, there's some real prominent individuals within the Inner Circle community. You know, you've got Pat Mack, you've got Susie O'Brien, you've got Penny Douglas, you know, and I've got a number of my team who are members as well, because although I'm a member and I attend as much as I can, the reality is I do very little casework unless it's neurodiversity related or mediation related now. You know, I have a team that do most of the employment law. What I love about it is that you do turn very complex employment law into the most simplest terms for us to understand it, because within HR, we can be anything from HR admin level to HR director. The whole level of experience that you have within your inner circle is from one end to the other, and you make it simple for everyone to understand. And that comes across in the document packages that you provide as part of that. You do the most fantastic training. I know Jenny, my head of consultancy recently, absolutely loved doing the Virtual Employment Law Academy with you recently, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, because I'd love you to tell everybody about that throughout this podcast. But I think the biggest thing that I found is the friendships that are formed in your community, and I know you can't always be in there, but Jenny kind of supports that and looks after the group.
Jenny, thank you for being so nice about her, is our Chief Operating Officer.
I think the biggest thing that I think your inner circle gives within that community is a safe space, because it's a close community of people that have their own reason for being in there. What I see is that safe space to ask a question that they might think, does this sound stupid, or is someone going to call me out and say I should know this because of the level I work at? What I see is sometimes quite senior HR professionals asking a question that somebody might assume they should know, feeling safe enough to ask it, and people genuinely want to help, instead of the keyboard warrior of, oh my God, should you be a consultant asking that? And, you know, I can't believe you've asked that, and you get a bit of a keyboard warrior. What you've got is you've genuinely got a community that are there to help each other and really support each other in a safe space. And that's really nice to see, because I see a lot of keyboard warriors on social media, unfortunately.
I think we have about 50% independent HR consultants and 50% in-house HR professionals. So a very, very even split. And most of them are quite experienced. We don't have that many newbies. We don't encourage newbies to join. We don't say no, but we don't positively go out and get newbies in there, because we want it to be a community for experienced people. There are very few members with less than 10 years experience in the HR Inner Circle. That means that they all have a certain amount of confidence, of knowledge. And I believe that confidence and the ability to help others does come from preparation, not personality. You can bluff your way through one or two things, but you can't bluff your way through 10, 15, 20 years of being a professional. If you know the law, if you understand how tribunals behave, if you can predict and avoid the common traps, you're ahead of most HR professionals and most organizations. I like to think the HR Inner Circle gives people that edge. It's about being proactive, about separating excellent HR from firefighting HR. We've all fallen into the firefighting trap. I do quite often. But there's more to HR than just firefighting. When you know what's coming, you stop reacting, you start shaping outcomes, and that shift changes your professional value, whether you're an independent consultant or working in-house. It changes your professional value overnight. Once people stop fearing the law and start using it, your influence inside your organization increases dramatically.
You've got it spot on there. Daniel, your background, talk to me about some of the most interesting cases that have really shaped you and your profession.
The cases that shape me the most, I think, are the ones that aren't about the law. It's about where people have made mistakes and the organization suffers because either the HR professional or far, far more commonly the manager, who was meant to be doing what they were told by the HR professional but doesn't, they make mistakes and it ends up in a tribunal. Some tribunals are about whether what happened was reasonable or not. So that's a question of judgment. It's very difficult often to second guess them unless you've got an obvious case one way or the other. And the cases that are obvious, where it's obvious the employer acted unreasonably or obvious the employer acted reasonably, tend not to end up in tribunal anyway. It's the grey areas that end up in tribunal. The other sorts of cases are the he said, she said cases. Did the manager harass the individual? He says no, she says yes, no witnesses, because managers tend not to sexually harass women when there are witnesses present. And there a tribunal's just got to decide who they believe. Now, those give me as a barrister the most opportunity for cross-examination and often confrontation as well, which, as I said, I used to love, but perhaps nowadays love a little less because no one wins from confrontation. Whereas the is somebody acting reasonably sort of tribunal case is very much where subtle advocacy wins the day, where you're just trying to paint shades of grey, we live in shades of grey, into black and white, and advocacy skill is really, really important there. But those cases are less fun. Trying to persuade a tribunal that someone has acted reasonably is less fun from a barrister's point of view than trying to persuade a tribunal that someone's a liar. One's really good fun, the other is a little more demanding.
Yeah, and I mean, my business, we specialise in employee relations and very much the complex case management and neurodiversity. I mean, we do the full services, but I have a team that absolutely thrive on employee relations. We can do the strategic, what I refer to as the fluffy stuff, but we don't. We tend to really enjoy a lot of the employment law side. And that can be quite challenging. I mean, you've touched on it a few times whereby, you know, we love a good challenge. I'm not going to deny we love a good challenge and finding a solution to something. And that's why we thrive on employee relations. But the reality is people don't realise, and this is often misunderstood in the world of HR, where especially in corporates and in-house, oh, well, that's your job. It is our job doing all of that, but actually it's really emotionally draining. And me and Jenny have a common phrase of we're peopled out by the end of the week. By the end of the week, we're absolutely exhausted, peopled out. It's a challenging environment. So where you're talking about, you did used to enjoy that and obviously your career's evolved throughout the years. Although we love helping people, we do reach a point in our life where we've kind of had enough.
Well, I know very well, Nikki, because we've known each other a very, very long time, that your team is very good at spotting issues before they escalate and guiding managers rather than mopping up after them. And that just makes the difference between a really good HR professional and a really good outsourced consultant and a average one. And I know you tick all the boxes where that exists.
Thank you. I really appreciate that coming from you. Really, really appreciate that. Now, Daniel, what a lot of people don't always realise with yourself is where you do your LBC legal hour, we know you for your employment law expertise. We know you for your employment tribunal stuff. But your LBC legal hour actually covers the bigger scope of legal questions and answers. I've listened to a couple of them where they've been shared within the community in the group, and some of them are just hilarious with some of the calls and queries you get where they just won't listen to you and you're the expert. It's got to be fun doing some of those, especially when you have someone who's Googled or used AI and I think they know more.
Yeah, it's amazing fun. I've been doing it almost 16 years now. It's played absolute havoc with my social life because for the last 10 years, it's been every Saturday night. So I've, other than the very odd holiday, and I talked about taking a lot of holidays, a lot of my holidays are Sunday to Saturday afternoon because I have to be in the studio on a Saturday evening. Other than the very odd holiday spanning over Saturdays, I've been in Leicester Square every Saturday night for 10 years. Mrs. B accepts it, but she doesn't really appreciate it. It's great. It's an adrenaline buzz every single time I go in. But as you say, it's not just employment law. I cover the whole gamut of legal questions, everything from commercial, consumer. I hate parking tickets. I don't take questions on parking tickets. We turn away so many callers on that. Every single time, the answer is always just pay the thing because you parked illegally. And business disputes, insurance disputes. The things I don't do on air are criminal, because that's got Ofcom rules that prohibit discussion of live criminal cases, immigration because I don't know anything about it, and wills because I don't know anything about that either. Due to a really bizarre quirk in the way that lawyers are trained, solicitors learn about wills and barristers don't, so I don't know a thing about wills other than everyone should have one. I'm hardly the person you look at for that because I was in my 40s before I did a will. But it's immense fun, and most of the people calling in are people with really genuine legal problems where they need help, they need pointing in the right direction, they just need somebody to talk to. And I wish I could have more time because I can't spend more than 3, 4, 5 minutes tops with any one caller, just because of the sheer number of people trying to phone in and the way that radio phone-ins work, with 12-minute segments and a 3-minute break for news and adverts. So if I want to get 2 callers in a 12-minute segment, plus me talking a little bit to introduce the next segment, it's 5 minutes max for each caller. But we also, as you say, sometimes get people who just want to voice an opinion and aren't really looking for legal advice. And they're quite good fun because I give them rope and they hang themselves with it. One case I had recently, or one call I had recently, and these are all on YouTube, by the way. If anyone wants to watch some of the clips, go to youtubelegal.co.uk and that'll take you straight to my YouTube channel. One call I had, for example, that comes to mind was a man who was arguing over his bonus. He was a banker. And I think his salary was £360,000 from memory. And I lost my cool with him on air. It's like, you earn £360,000. Go and pay for a lawyer yourself and don't deprive people who don't have money of the chance to get on air and be able to speak to a lawyer for free. I've had a woman who had a cup of tea spilled over her when she was on an aeroplane and she'd not hurt herself, she was just cross. She wanted to sue. And when I was chatting with her, she was describing how she reached across to take the saucer. I was thinking, when I fly on EasyJet, I don't get a saucer. And she was flying first class. And when I asked her if she was flying first class, she didn't want to answer. So I just started saying, were you flying first class? Were you flying? And eventually she answered. And you could tell how embarrassed she was that she was phoning up a radio show over a spillage that didn't hurt her. We've had some very strange moments as well. Before anyone can actually get onto air, they have to talk to a producer, and the producer vets the question. A few weeks ago, I had a situation where someone was coming on air. I have a little screen in front of me that tells me in about 5 words what the question is. So it might be, Nikki has difficult neighbour, something like that. It gives me that tiny amount of information. So I said, hi, name them, you're on the air. And rather than saying what they told the producer they were going to say, they just started screaming, you effing C, because they were drunk and they thought it was funny and they thought it was hilarious to phone a live radio show. Now, of course, it's not technically live. It's 10 seconds behind live. So we have a little dump button that we can press and it cuts out the last 5 seconds. We can do that twice during a show. So we cut it, but that's just the sort of thing you have to deal with on air. And very often I get people asking me questions where I don't know the answers. And that's the hardest thing. There's no opportunity to go away and look it up as I would do if I was being a real barrister with my wig and gown on. It's a live show. I've got to give immediate answers. And what tends to happen then? It happens less nowadays because after 15 years of doing it, I've had most of the questions. And when I haven't known the answer, I go and look it up after so I know it for next time. But I'll just throw it out to the listeners. We've got 100,000 people listening. That's more than you can cram into Wembley Stadium. Generally, if anyone knows the answer, just text it into 84850. People text in the answers and I can read them out. And that's a really good way of being able to crowdsource knowledge and advice.
Actually, you hit on something there that's really important, not just in your sector, but in the HR sector as well, that we can't be experts in everything. And I think what you're doing there is, you're very open, Daniel, that you are an absolute expert in your field, but we cannot be an expert in everything. And we are going to have something come up that we don't know. And I think what you're doing there is you're demonstrating really importantly to the HR field and sector that will be listening to this, that it's okay to admit when you don't know something and kind of go, does anyone else know? Or let me go away and look and find out and come to you, especially when you're in-house or you're a HR consultant, because people do know you to expect the answer to everything. And you've just demonstrated perfectly there that actually it's okay to go, I don't know the answer, or if anyone else knows, or I'll go away and research, or I'll come back to you. That's okay, because actually that drives the respect that we cannot be the oracle of everything.
And one of the most difficult things, actually, this is ironic. I'm a specialist in employment law. With other areas of law, when I'm talking to people on personal injury, I speak with some level of knowledge, but I don't know what I don't know, because it's not my bread and butter. With employment law, I know what I don't know. I know there might be some technical point about the national minimum wage for part-time workers buried deep within the regulations. I know it exists, but I also know I have to go and look it up. So knowing what I don't know is actually quite difficult, because I have to say to people sometimes, now I know there's an answer to that, but I can't give it to you. Whereas if it was a personal injury question, I wouldn't know that I don't know it, and I just talk from first principles, which surprises some people that my area of expertise is the one I find hardest to answer questions on. Plus, of course, there's the fact that with personal injury, I'm just using that as an example, someone's tripped over a pothole or slipped on a grape in a supermarket, or a curtain rail's fallen on their head, or they've had a car crash, and the story is relatively straightforward. With employment disputes, there's often a long, long backstory involving months or years of difficulties at work. And it's very difficult for people who aren't accustomed to being succinct to extract the core relevant material and deliver it to me in an articulate 90-second monologue. And a lot of my time on air is often spent trying to extract the information from people who want to tell me what happened 17 years ago when a manager blinked the wrong way at a colleague, which has actually got very little to do with the legal problem they're suffering from.
Daniel, you're very passionate about employment law and helping HR professionals, and you obviously set up the HR Inner Circle upon the back of that. What is in the future for the HR Inner Circle and its members? What's your plans for it long term?
Well, it sounds a bit complacent, but a lot of it is more of the same, because it's just helping people at the moment. I'm always building, so we're building toolkits at the moment. One that I know you'd be interested in is a neurodiversity toolkit.
Yes.
New seminars, new modules. But right now, my focus is on expanding the Inner Circle's resources and updating the Virtual Employment Law Academy, which I think you said we were going to talk about shortly, for the massive wave of legislative changes coming through next year, assuming the Employment Rights Bill gets passed into the Employment Rights Act. I'm also developing new materials for senior HR leaders who want to transition from generalist work into strategic HR leadership. Now, that's not something I know a lot about. I'm a litigator, I'm not a strategist, so I'll be calling on a lot of the expertise from members of the HR Inner Circle to help write material with me, and hopefully we'll be able to put something really, really good together.
Fabulous. Now, you've touched on some subjects there that obviously are a passion of mine. You know, neurodiversity is a passion of mine. I'm an individual with ADHD with autistic traits as well.
I've listened to your podcast with Janine Perryman. I think you've done a couple of them, and they're fantastic. They're on ADHD.
They are. Now, Janine Perryman does a lot of work with us. So Janine Perryman was actually my tutor when I did that year of training as an ADHD coach last year. She designed the whole course. She was working with the ADHD Foundation who did that. It was a year of training. And the reason I did that year of training, which was hard work on top of running a business, was because their level was significantly higher than a lot of the training courses that was out there. If you don't get coaching right for a neurodiverse individual, it can be quite damaging from a trauma point of view and triggering for them. And it's been a subject that's been a passion of mine for 5 years. So I got to know Janine as part of that last year. So she does a lot of work. So within our business, myself and Janine are the lead screeners. So I'm the lead screener from a workplace expert point of view. And we're very unique as a model. I don't know any other HR company that specialise in neurodiversity and employment law, because what we find is you get neurodiverse organisations that are very employee-centric. Then you get HR companies where it's very employment law focused, but we've not found anyone else, and I could be wrong. You know, if any of the listeners know someone else, I would love to connect with them. But we combine and find that middle ground, because one of the biggest challenges of neurodiversity that we're finding, we've seen a big uplift, which is why we specialise in it over the 5 years that we've done it and worked in that field, is that there's a huge rise. Probably 70% of the conciliations, disputes, ETs that we deal with are neurodiverse related, and we deal with a really high volume in it. But what we're finding is that we're still consistently finding from employees that they feel the whole responsibility sits with the workplace. I'm like yourself, I'm very upfront, I'm very forthright in talking. I'm like, it's not okay to swear or threaten someone and say it's because you're autistic or neurodiverse. And we find that middle ground of, Here's all of the tools in the screening. This now helps you understand yourself and what potential 6 conditions you've got going on and overlapping, because they rarely sit alone. These are all the strengths, and we take a strengths-based approach in the reporting system, which is actually designed by Professor Amanda Kirby, who you'll be aware of from your conference earlier this year in the Do It. So they are our workplace screening system. And I was introduced to it last year when I did my coaching qualification, which is how I ended up with Amanda and being approved as a screener. And I mean, it's a fantastic tool, but what we do is it gives them the tools to understand themselves. We identify the strengths and the challenges and how they can use the strengths to manage their challenges. And then it gives them all of their tools around the challenges. So information if they have trouble planning and organising or timekeeping or with focus. It's a fantastic toolkit. But what we do is we kind of go, these are the workplace responsibilities and these are the reasonable adjustments we're recommending as a screener and a HR professional, but also we've already spoken to the business to understand what their boundaries and expectations are on reasonable adjustments as well, because it's different for every business. As you know, not everyone can do the same, depending on, money, size, things like that. And then we also understand if there's any challenges with them delivering their roles. So we will understand going into that meeting with the employee and the workplace and kind of set up next steps and adjustments that's tailored to them and their outcomes. We're not diagnosers. We are not therapists, we are not counsellors, we are not psychologists, we are workplace experts with an employment law knowledge that knows how to read the reports and help people understand themselves and move forward. And that's what we do. But with Janine, coming back to Janine, she is a clinical with psychology training, and she's able to do an additional report that we can do, which is perfect for employment tribunals when we know it's going that way. And it's called CREOS. Now, CREOS is a clinical report, and it actually is commonly used for Alzheimer's and dementia within the clinical sector. What Janine is able to do is we will get her to do that report on top of the Do It profile. And that then enables us to get a report written by her as a psychology trained and clinical specialist that we then use as part of the tribunal case management. So me and Janine are off to a book retreat with Moja in February.
Excellent.
And we're going to be writing 2 books together. One is Neurodiversity for HR Professionals, and another one is Neurodiversity for the legal field, because Janine went through her own court case recently. So she's going to use that personal experience and the 2 of us with our knowledge to write a couple of books that we're planning to do with Moja next year.
Fantastic. Well, of course, you just did an online session very recently for members of the HR Inner Circle. Normally, we put on a lot of online training. I mean, there's so much there, and libraries going back 11 years now that there's more than you can shake a stick at. But I think you are the first person who's a member who's provided a training session, because normally it's provided by external people we get in. But you know so much about neurodiversity. Jenny, our COO, said, right, we've got to get Nikki on to run a session. And that was really, really well received.
It was. I mean, thank you. I really appreciated that. And I absolutely loved doing it as well. I noticed when I did it, we had 90 people watching it. I was like, okay, no pressure here, but really enjoyed it. It's lived experience. We love what we do. It does protect employers. I mean, we've had a claim come in this week for one of our clients. Now, we knew it was going to brew from day one because we recognise it in behaviour, tone. As soon as we get a client that phones us up and talks to us about some of the challenges, straight away we go, is that person neurodiverse? Have they declared it? We're kind of seeing some of the patterns here. This was a case that's rumbled on for a few months, and we actually knew this was going to brew. And we knew she potentially would end up bringing a claim at some point, and she's no longer with the business and now has for discrimination. The advantage we've got is that as soon as she declared she was neurodiverse, we instigated the screening. We involved occupational health as an add-on because we saw some wellness concerns there within the reports, and made sure she was looked after. Doing a process when an employee declares they're neurodiverse or says they're neurodivergent, there's a misconception that somebody with a diagnosis is the biggest person with the struggles in the room, and that's not always the case. It could be someone who hasn't got a diagnosis because actually they don't know anything.
Well, my daughter's a clinical psychologist, or a trainee clinical psychologist within the NHS, and the waiting lists to get a diagnosis of autism, which is what she specialises in, are horrendous, years rather than months. So there are a lot of undiagnosed people out there.
There absolutely is. And I had this conversation earlier this week. So I saw a press release from an NHS trust, I think in the Hertfordshire area, that have actually said they are now no longer accepting neurodiverse referrals unless that individual is going through a high level of psychological impact and effectively crisis in relation to their mental health. So the standard waiting list for a single diagnosis at the moment is 8 to 10 years within any NHS referral. A lot of them have now stopped taking referrals unless that person is in crisis with their mental health. But also one of the challenges, and I know me and Janine, you mentioned that, me and Janine talked about that. I think diagnosis has its place. However, the screening gives immediate answers and gives them insights into other things that could be overlapping and affecting. Autism, ADHD can have a significant impact within a person when they're combined and overlapping. And diagnosis, although it has its benefits, and it has to have a benefit for you to meet that threshold for diagnosis, what it still doesn't do is help people understand themselves. It still doesn't help them understand the overlap. And I guess one of my concerns around that announcement that went out this week, Daniel, and you may be able to answer this, and if you can't, because it's kind of more of a guess as to what's going to happen. If individuals are needing to get a diagnosis by the time they hit a tribunal in front of a judge, and obviously they're protected from the point they declare it anyway under the Equality Act, but there's always been people normally have a diagnosis by the time they hit a tribunal in front of a judge. If they don't have the money for a private diagnosis and they can't get referred under the NHS because they're not deemed at crisis point in mental health, what is that going to mean for a judge in the tribunal case?
Well, if it's a disability discrimination claim, they don't need a formal diagnosis, of course. They have to show they're disabled within the meaning of the Equality Act, which means that they have to show that they have a long-term condition, one that's lasted more than 12 months, or is likely to last 12 months, that has a more than trivial impact on their ability to carry out day-to-day activities. And it's actually unusual for that to be demonstrated with medical evidence in a tribunal. That's the exception. What normally happens is that somebody will provide something called an impact statement. That's a 3 or 5 or 10-page statement talking about the impact of their condition on their ability to carry out day-to-day activities. Diagnosis is almost irrelevant. It's the impact on day-to-day activities that gets the tick for the qualifying as disabled under the Equality Act. So you don't need a medical diagnosis at all. The vast majority of cases have them because people have been to GPs and got a GP's diagnosis, even if not a formal consultant's diagnosis, but you don't need one. It's a complete red herring and a myth that you need one. While you were talking, I thought of something really interesting, which is your position as an independent HR consultant who specialises in helping organisations help those with neurodiversity issues must give you some real ethical or practical dilemmas, because I would have thought a lot of employers say, how much is it going to cost us in cash terms, reduced productivity terms, and management time and supervision and support to keep this person employed, versus how much is it going to cost us to sign a settlement agreement with them? And when you're being frank with a lot of employers, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, it's just a thing. When you're being frank with a lot of employers, you'll be saying it's going to cost you an extra $12,000 a year in reduced productivity and support and lost management time. Not even the cost of adjustments, but the lost management time helping and supporting to keep this person employed. But you could probably get them to sign a settlement agreement for $10,000. What would you rather have? One-off payment of $10,000 or an ongoing cost of $12,000? It often makes commercial sense for a business to do the unkind, the morally unkind thing. And that must really bring home for you the problem of whose side am I on? Am I on the employee side or am I on the employer side? How do you resolve that?
It's hard. I mean, I am very no nonsense. We're there to sit on the fence, but I'm also very commercial minded. When you're in-house, you will always look at the employee and supporting the employee, and it will always take that softer approach of support.
Yeah. And Nikki, I'm going to interrupt you if you don't mind. You've never sat on the fence in your life.
I have no idea what you mean. Yeah, I'm opinionated. I'm not going to get away from that. I'm straight talking. Yes. Look, I am very commercial minded as well. I know from running my own business the pressure it puts on a business and a business owner and financial. I am not going to deny as an organisation that 9 times out of 10, when a business approaches us, they're at breaking point with someone. They've come to us because they're at dispute resolution point. There's probably only 10% of the neurodiversity work that comes to us, although there is a lot more recently. We've seen a big influx in the last few weeks of businesses wanting to put in neurodiversity strategies and offer this screening to all of their employees, not just those that have declared they're neurodiverse, because they want to really create that inclusive workplace. But the reality is 90% of what we deal with is an employee that's had enough by that point. They've got a really difficult employee. They've had enough. And I am not going to deny we do a lot of settlement agreements. But I have always had this basis of, yes, we're no nonsense. Yes, we will help somebody exit, but we do it with kindness.
Yeah.
So
here's a question. Is the employer in that situation who's exiting a neurodiverse employee on financial terms that the neurodiverse employee is happy with, Is that employer the angel or the devil?
I think it depends on the behaviour. That is it the right thing to help that person move on and they're the angel, or have they been such a nightmare? And I mean, I'll give you an example. I have witnessed a client that has been on the verge, and an employer that has been on the verge of suicide because of individuals and their behaviours. And sometimes in those cases, that employee is absolutely being the devil. They're in victim mode. They won't accept the feedback. They won't take on board that having strategies and masking is the right thing to do because there's still professional standards. And they've thought it's a free-for-all because, oh, well, I want to be my authentic self, so I'm just going to behave however I want. And there has absolutely been devils in those individuals. And I won't put up with that. I'll be like, I'll be very honest with the business. They need to go. Give me a pot of money. We'll exit them. So we will have that conversation before it breaks the employer. But then sometimes we've also been very kind where we've had employees that are neurodiverse and actually they're angels, but they're in the wrong job. And that's where we've had a conversation. We've done the screening. We've referred them to occupational health, who've backed up our opinion that they're in a job that their challenges with their neurodiverse are not suitable, and it's never going to suit them, and it's going to put pressure on them and pressure on the workplace. We've had settlement agreements and conversations where we've exited them because it was the right thing to do for the workplace and it was the right thing to do for the employee. They were angels, so we actually deal with both.
I think for the first time in your life, you've just sat on the fence.
I know.
Sometimes they're angels and sometimes they're devils, but sometimes they're angels.
But we will have an opinion of who they are.
Yes, fair enough.
Daniel, talk to me about the Virtual Employment Law Academy. What is it and what benefits does it bring? And talk to me about the upcoming one that you've got coming as well.
So the Virtual Employment Law Academy is something I set up 4 years ago. We're just about to go into our 5th year. It launches at the end of January. It's an 18-week course, 9 weeks, then a 4-week break, then another 9 weeks, which is a undergraduate level course on employment law. So it'll give an HR professional the same level of knowledge, basically, as a solicitor who's newly qualified. Not the same level of knowledge as a solicitor who's been doing the job for 30 years, but certainly a newly qualified solicitor. You have the undergraduate level of employment law knowledge. And it came about a few years ago because members of the HR Inner Circle wanted deeper, structured learning rather than short updates. They wanted the equivalent of a university level course, but delivered, first of all, in plain English, and second of all, focused entirely on practical application. So I built the academy to cover the entire employment life cycle from recruitment through to dismissal, covering all the stuff surrounding payroll along the way. And what makes it effective, I think, is the sequence. Each module builds on the last. By the end, members can see, or students can see, the whole of the employment law landscape as an integrated system rather than a collection of isolated rules. And it transforms the way people think and the way that organizations manage risk. I know that one of your team got a merit on it recently.
Jenny did. She did absolutely brilliant. I'm so proud of her. I knew she would. She was worried. I was like, I'm not worried for a minute.
Well, doing well on it, getting a merit or distinction. The people who get the most from the academy are the ones who bring questions, challenge assumptions, apply the material to real cases, because that's how learning sticks. And the way we do it is every Tuesday, 10 a.m. for 9 weeks, break another 9 weeks. I'm in a TV studio. So we hire out a proper TV studio. I speak into the camera on the topic of the week, whatever it might be, for about an hour, 90 minutes. For example, the topic of the week might be how to dismiss somebody for misconduct, or how to manage long-term absence. And we then have up to an hour of Q&A with the students asking me questions. Everyone gets recordings, but also available transcripts. We have, depending on what package you choose, we have tutorials. So every fortnight, all the students split into small groups of about 8 to 10 people. And on a separate Zoom session, they go through a case study which has a real-life problem from a case I've dealt with, usually based on the subjects they've studied over the last 2 weeks. It's led by a man called John Sprack, who's a retired employment law judge, employment tribunal judge. He's the most lovely man in the world. He's the complete stellar opposite of me. I'm quite confrontational. He is very gentle, very relaxed, very calming, and he's just the most lovely man to host these tutorials. So he does the tutorials, you can get transcripts. We have 2 written assessments. Assessment at the end of term 1, assessment at the end of term 2, and assuming you pass both, you get the qualification. And as you said, Jenny got a merit, which is impressive.
She did. I'm very, very proud of her. And she is our lead expert in the business. She obviously looks after all of our team of consultants and works very, very closely with Penny Douglas on some of our more complex work as well, which they occasionally bounce off me, because I know when I looked at the Vila, I said to Jenny, do I do it with you? Am I going to struggle for time? And actually, the reality is I don't give a lot of complex advice anymore because I'm not on the phone lines. I obviously bounce things off with Jenny when something comes in, and we'll bounce it off on based on our experience. But very much Jenny is that person now. It's a fantastic program, but you're right in that you've kind of got to be at a certain level of experience to kind of be able to cope with that, because actually I know the assignments are at a significant high level on delivery and what they need to write, and a real in-depth level of knowledge. I know when I was talking to Jenny about it, we work generally as an organisation with a lot of HR admin, lower level advisors, individuals that are still in the very early stages of career, first 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And I know we talked earlier about how the HR inner circle is a lot of higher level, 10 years plus, which is why the advice and the questions that are asked are, it's not basic holiday questions in there, that it's at a much higher level of experience. And even I come across a lot of things in there that are like, oh, I'd not realised that, because it might be a sector I've not always been in. But there is a bit of a gap out there in relation to HR knowledge from what I find people early stages career in their first 10 years. And the Vila's fantastic for the higher level, which you already deliver. But I'm starting to see gaps in the marketplace. As you probably know, there's a change coming along in the apprenticeships later this year, where it will no longer be accessible for people to get that funding for a level 3 or a level 5 training. I'm starting to see some real gaps opening up with early stage HR professionals that just don't have access and are not going to have access to that really high quality learning that they need. I know there's the CIPD out there. The reality is, in a lot of what we certainly do, the CIPD is not suitable for what we do. I've never gone that route.
The problem with career development for people in their first 2, 3, 4, 5 years is, I think, budget. Employers generally aren't willing to invest in developing the careers of people 2, 3 years in who might be going off to a competitor next week. It's not a market where there's a lot of people getting involved and making a lot of money, because employers tend not to pay to train very junior people. They regard it as the individual's responsibility to train themselves. So I have a huge amount of free stuff available on my website, which is danielbarnett.com. You can, first of all, sign up for my legal update bulletins, which give you 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, usually 2 or 3, updates a week of important cases or developments that have just happened in the courts or in legislation. Second of all, you do your amazing podcast, Nikki, so do I. And again, the details are available on my website. Third, I do produce small books, and you'll know what these are.
Yes.
You were talking about writing books before. I've written, have a guess how many books I've written in my 35 years of being a barrister.
Well, I've got all of your books on my shelf in the office,
Bet
and
you haven't.
my team are encouraged to read them all. Is it 27, 20-something, I think, exist of
so
those
in the
ones
Employment
now.
Law Library series, which is the one you'll have because they all come out free to members of the HR Inner Circle, we're just about to publish book number 24. But I've probably written another 10 or so books on top of that, which are much thicker, heavier, detailed books, including the very first book I wrote in 1999, which was called Avoiding Unfair Dismissal Claims. It was really how to sack people and get away with it, but my publishers wouldn't let me call it that. And the chapters were literally how to dismiss for redundancy, how to dismiss for poor performance. Back then, 1999, The Independent wrote a double-page spread on me a few days after it came out. And I was described by Jimmy Knapp, who was then the General Secretary of the GMT, as possibly the most evil man in Britain. I was 29 years old at the time. But the day that Independent article came out, the double spread, the book went to number 1 in the Amazon charts. Amazon was a new website in 1999. Went to number 1 in the Amazon charts for 1 hour at 10 a.m. on the day that article came out, knocking J.K. Rowling off the number 1 spot and also beating Stephen King and Jeffrey Archer, which I've still got the screenshot of that. That's not a screenshot. I had to take a photo. They didn't have screenshots back in those days. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, knocking J.K. Rowling off the number 1 slot. Back to the question. The small books that I write, they're all available on Amazon. You can just search up my surname and they come out automatically to members of the HR Inner Circle as well. And they are basic focused guides on particular topics. For example, we're just rewriting and updating the book, I say we, me, on employee investigations. That's just being rewritten. But there's books ranging from GDPR for HR professionals to how to manage stress. There's 24 of them.
Malingering, one of my favourite ones.
Malingering, that's a topic. I used to lecture extensively on malingering, and I came up with these. I'm not going to go through what they are now, but I came up with Barnett's 7 rules of malingering, of how to spot a malingerer. And I used to get the mickey taken out of me in employment tribunals, so I had to stop doing that. But when I was talking about malingering, there's an American test, a psychological test, which is a series of 572 yes-no questions where people have to answer yes or no to questions like, do you feel happy most of the time? You know, they're obvious questions like that. But after 572 questions, you get bored. Malingerers will tend to contradict themselves. People describing accurate symptoms will tell the truth and be consistent. And that's what it's designed to root out. It's called the Minnesota Multiphasic Inventory Test, which is harder than she sells seashells on the seashore. And I remember having to practice when I was giving a nationwide lecture years ago about malingering, 6 hours talking about how to spot a malingerer. I had to practice saying Minnesota Multiphasic Inventory Test in front of the mirror over and over again. There are many, many courses out there. I haven't done in-person courses for a few years. The last one I did was just before COVID, and I've been doing courses online mostly since then, but I'm going to do one next year, I think, to promote the Employment Rights Act once we know what's happening with it. And I'll just be talking for 6 hours in typically 17 cities around the UK on what you've got to do to cope with all the changes being brought in by the Employment Rights Bill / Act. And those are really good sources as well. We always offer some free places to people who genuinely can't afford them. By the way, the Virtual Employment Law Academy has free places on it typically for people who are very junior and don't have an employer to pay for them. So we offer 6 scholarships for the Virtual Employment Law Academy. The closing date is mid-January. Anybody who wants to find out a little more about that can just go to danielbarnett.com/academy. Unfortunately, the Virtual Employment Law Academy website is massive. The page is huge. It's got so much information on it, but it means that it takes about 17 seconds to load, which is a real pain, Nikki. People move away from it before it's loaded. But if you go right down to the bottom of that page, danielbarnett.com/academy, there's an FAQ section, and the information about the scholarships is in the FAQs, including the closing date.
Fabulous.
And there's just so much free information out there. You could even go onto ChatGPT and set up a recurring instruction for every week for it to search for updates on employment law and fill you in on what's happened. ChatGPT will do that for you now as a recurring task.
I mean, we get some great material from you. I mean, we are signed up for Darren Newman due to having met him through yourself. He does some great updates. Obviously, all of our team are signed up to your mailing list. Obviously, we know there's the Vila, all the recordings, the Q&A. I mean, the benefits of the HR Inner Circle. When I meet with clients, I had a meeting with a client this week. I was doing a detailed audit with one of my team, and the client specifically asked me to go in because they're looking ahead at their bigger strategy and wanted me there to kind of input from a HR director point of view what my thoughts were around the strategy. They want to look at their values, their culture. They've got 2 junior HR team that we're kind of mentoring and supporting through their early stages. One of them's recently done a CIPD level 3, currently working our way through level 5. And then they've got another one that's been doing a level 5 as well. So I'm always recommending your books that are on Amazon. I know me and Jenny have your bigger employment law guide, and we've got your last release from, was it earlier this year or last year?
The Employment Law Handbook, it's in its 9th edition. It's 2023, so it's a few years old now. Everyone's asking me when it's going to get updated, but I can't update it till we know what's happening with the Employment Rights Act, because for a big, huge book like that, it's a 6 to 9 month publication process. For my small books, it's a 2-month publication process. But once it hits the bookshelf, it'll already be out of date. So there's no point in updating it till we're further down the line, which is frustrating for a lot of people, I know. You mentioned Darren Newman a second ago, Nikki. And funnily enough, I'm going to the theatre with Darren Newman tonight. Darren Newman is, I think, the UK's best employment law trainer. It's darrennewman.org.
Darren is just brilliant. In relation to everything you've shared, there's lots of podcasts. Thank you for sharing about the different ones. Obviously, the Vila is relevant, so that's great. So I can make sure I can recommend that to our connections and the conversations I have. I mean, I love the HR Inner Circle. I love everything it is about. It's a fabulous concept along with everything that it does. Staying up to date as a HR professional is just so important, Daniel. And I know it's a passion of yours and it's a passion of mine. So I guess my final question in relation to the Inner Circle is, why should HR professionals consider joining the HR Inner Circle? And what benefits is there and coming up for anyone joining?
Well, I'll answer the second part first, what benefits there are for people who join. You get a goodie box. And Nikki, I'm afraid you're too long in the tooth to have a goodie box because we didn't do them back in, I think, 2016 when you joined. But you get a goodie box with all sorts of fantastic stuff. And then every month you get a copy of one of my books. So over the course of 2 years, you'll develop the full library. And as a member, every single member, every month they get a big yellow envelope in the post with a magazine in it, because it's so nice to hold physical magazines still. And it's a really practical magazine. It's 28 pages long or 32 pages long, depending on the month. And so it's not like one of those paper-thin magazines with 250 pages of adverts in. We never carry adverts. It's just really good information. You get access to regular webinars, huddles. We have coffee and case law sessions around the UK where a couple of people from my team meet up with members and you go through live case scenarios. But why should people join? The HR Inner Circle is the ultimate, I think, organisation for smart, ambitious HR professionals who want confidence, who feel like they're alone, but don't need to be. And it's almost like having a part-time HR assistant working for you, because in our Facebook group, for example, you can ask a question, no matter how stupid it is. You said people don't ask stupid questions. They do, but that's fine because we're all there to support everybody. You can ask a question and within 2 hours, you will get anything between 3 and 20 people replying with really helpful practical answers because they've been there, they've done it, they've seen it. And it's that community, it's the support and the friendliness that I think makes the HR Inner Circle different from any other organisation there is out there. Everyone loves being a member. We've never done a Net Promoter Score for the HR Inner Circle. Are you familiar with a Net Promoter Score?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a retail background, so we used to do that quite a lot.
Let me just explain it for anyone listening who isn't familiar with it. A Net Promoter Score is a very simple question that you ask customers. It's, would you recommend this service to others? It's that simple. Would you recommend the HR Inner Circle to others? And people are asked to score it from 0 to 10. If somebody says 9 or 10, it counts as a positive mark. If someone says 7 or 8, and most people answer 7 for all these questions, it counts as neutral. And if they answer 6 or below, it's a -1 mark. And the result, when you average it out with thousands of people answering, is always between -100 and 100 because of the way it's done. It's a test developed by Bain & Co., the management consultants, and it's used by leading global brands to gauge customer loyalty. Now, we've never done a Net Promoter Score for the HR Inner Circle, but we've done them for the Virtual Employment Law Academy, and it would be the same for the HR Inner Circle because it's the same ethos. Just to give you some sort of idea, top consumer brands like Apple or Tesla typically score around 70 to 75. And back me up, Nikki, you've got a retail background, you know this is right.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Generally, Bain & Co. say that anything over 50 is excellent, anything over 70 is world-class. Apple and Tesla are 70 to 75. 0 to 30 is average. If you're in the negatives, that's not great. But a good company will typically score 0 to 30 out of 100 on this. The Virtual Employment Law Academy, at our last time we did the Net Promoter Score, and we had, I think, 260 people answering. So it's not just 6 of my friends, 260 students. We've got a Net Promoter Score of 80, which is just an unbelievably high tier for customer loyalty and advocacy.
You don't get those scores in Net Promoters. I know I spent 24 years in corporate and retail and hospitality, and you don't get them scores.
Nobody gets those scores, but the Virtual Employment Law Academy didn't. If we did it for the HR Inner Circle, I suspect it probably would as well, because people join and they stay. I mean, obviously we get people leaving, people move jobs, people retire, people's employers say we just can't afford to pay for it anymore. But I'm a member of several organisations that teach how to run membership organisations, because the HR Inner Circle is a membership organisation. We have the lowest churn rate, which is the number of people who resign, and we have the lowest churn rate of any membership organisation that I know of. People just love it. They come, they stay. And I would strongly encourage your listeners to give it a try. Unfortunately, we don't offer free trials.
No, you don't. But I would certainly say they wouldn't regret joining the Inner Circle. The benefits and everything that you get speak for itself, especially if it's HR's your career. And it does follow you. And you do a couple of memberships. You obviously the individual, but you also do the corporate one where you'll get the primary member and then the additional people that can then be added onto it. So you do a couple of memberships, I know, because I've got the corporate one where I've got multiple team as members. I certainly recommend it, as well as your books, as well as your legal hours, as well as everything else that you do and all the free resources on your website. So if people wanted to become members of the HR Inner Circle, Daniel, what is the easiest and best way for them to do that?
Well, it's a really hard website address, Nikki, hrinnercircle.co.uk. And there's so much information on there about it. What tends to happen is people get bored reading it and they just scroll right down to the bottom and click join.
What else is for you, Daniel? What else personal level for you or outside of the Inner Circle is on the planner for you?
Well, I'm a massive theatre geek, as I said just before. My ambition, or one of my targets for 2025, I have a list of 100 goals to complete each year. One of them was to see 100 shows in 2025. We're recording this at the end of November 2025. Have a guess how many I've seen so far, including 25 that I saw at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
Wow. And you 70 maybe?
A little bit short, 126. I saw my
Oh
126th
my
show last night,
God.
127th this evening with Darren Newman. So one thing I love is theatre. And as I mentioned to you, I write a theatre review column as well in a magazine. The other thing I'm very into is wine, which makes me sound like a complete alcoholic. But I recently, very recently, last week in fact, achieved a qualification in wine called the WSET Level 3, which technically means I could be a sommelier at pretty much any restaurant, and I can bore, as in B-O-R-E, bore for England about the factors that can help grapes grow in a particular way and winemaking techniques and what the terroir in a particular region will do to impact a particular aroma or flavour of a grape. But I won't bore you with all of that now.
Linda, my business advisor, she's been my business advisor for 9 years. She's an expert in wine. She used to work in the wine industry. She could talk to you all day about wine tasting. I have no class when it comes to wine, I'm afraid. I'm a flavoured gin with lemonade girl, and I'm a bottle of Lambrini.
Does that even exist anymore, Nikki?
It does, actually. I've got a fridge full of baby sham. Yeah, I've got no class when it comes to wine. I wouldn't know where to begin. I obviously need to find out what your favourite wine is from Jenny and get you sent a bottle to say thank you for today.
I'll tell you now, it's an Amarone della Valpolicella.
Daniel, I've covered everything and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate your time so much because I know how busy you are. Anything final you would like to say as to why HR professionals, whether they're in-house or consultant, should be following you, signing up to your mailing list, going on your inner circle, and what is the best way for them to follow or connect with you?
I'll give you my website again. It's danielbarnett.com or hrinacircle.co.uk. But other than that, I'm not going to talk about why people should join it. Don't. It's up to you. I'm just going to say, Nikki, thank you so much. You've been a great member of the HR Inner Circle for the last decade. It's great doing stuff with you, and I've really enjoyed this last hour. Thank you.
I have. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for listening to the HR Business Blueprint podcast. For any information on what we've covered in this episode, head over to the show notes. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks for listening.